and we make a fetish, frankly, out of the color of one's skin, the gender identity, all of these ways of parsing people.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Philip Wegmann, White House reporter for RCP, and I'm joined now by Connecticut Representative Jim Himes. He is the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, and we're very lucky to have him today. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I won't sugarcoat it, Congressman. After losing the Senate and the White House, and at a moment when 60% of the country views your party unfavorably, according to a recent Wall Street Journal poll, Democrats are on the back foot. And yet you sort of sent out a hold fast signal to your party the other day when you warned on Twitter that Trump is at his maximum political power now, implying that at some point in the coming months or years that power would wane. So what should the Democratic playbook be for the next 4 years? And is it enough to rerun the sort of resistance playbook from the first Trump term, or is an update needed?
Yeah, no, it's not enough to run the same resistance playbook, and I don't think that we could if we wanted to. I mean, there have been lots of observers who have observed that the opposition to Donald Trump is, a lot less energized than it was in Trump 1. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, including the fact that he won the popular vote. And, there's a lot of reflection going on inside my party about the fact that we offered a candidate who was vice president of the United States, strong legislative record, yes, damaged by inflation the way candidates all over the world were damaged by, but, civil, et cetera. And they chose the other guy. They chose a guy who uses the language that Donald Trump does, threatens to destroy things, threatens to prosecute his political enemies. And look, the American people chose that. And that means we need to be very, very thoughtful about sentiment. Right. And there's a couple things to say in that regard. Number one, as always, and we always forget this, it's the economy, stupid. We made a strategic decision to run on women's reproductive rights and the defense of democracy, both of which are absolutely essential, but it is the economy, stupid. And right now we're at risk of, because we're a little bewildered, chasing every, if I may mix my metaphor, shiny squirrel that Donald Trump throws out there. And if we're not careful, we will screw this up. Case in point, a lot of my colleagues went and raised hell outside of USAID yesterday. And what's happening inside USAID is inexcusable. A lot of people raising hell about Doge people showing up at Treasury with computer equipment and getting access to payment systems. I promise you that your middle-class family out there really doesn't care that much about USAID and the IT procedures inside Treasury. So I know I'm going to piss some people off by saying that, but we are at risk of chasing the latest shiny squirrel, and not staying focused on the fact that everything Donald Trump is doing so far is going to raise people's energy and food prices.
So if it's the economy first, and I do want to drill down on some of the executive actions that this administration has been right out of the gate with, but if it's the economy first, I want to get your reaction to Faiz Shakir, a longtime progressive strategist who ran unsuccessfully for DNC chair last week, when he said that Democrats, quote, utilize identity to break ourselves apart. What is your reaction to that sentiment, which is becoming kind of a theme, and it seems, sort of perhaps parallel to what you just laid out a moment ago?
So I didn't see his comments, but the gist is right. The gist is right. There is something in the American soul that rebels against really finely drawn identity politics. By the way, and you don't even need to go to our Constitution. Go to Martin Luther King's famous speech where he says, I look forward to the time when in this country someone is judged by the content of the character, not by the color of their skin. And we make a fetish, frankly, out of the color of one's skin, the gender identity, all of these ways of parsing people. And we do it for a good reason. And let me be very clear about this. We do it for a good reason, which is that many groups of people over the generations have been badly disenfranchised, if not to say, prejudiced and attacked by majority groups. And so we do it for all the right reasons. But again, there's something in the American soul that if you're spending all of your time talking about intersectionality and, the various fine gradations of gender preference and stuff, the American people aren't bad people. Yeah, of course, there are some bigots out there, but they see that and they say, wait a second. What about my grocery bill? What about my energy bill? What about the fact that there's no way I can afford my kids' college? So it comes back to it's the economy stupid. Look, we forget this, but how does Boris Johnson in the UK build the most stomping, and it feels like a million years ago, but the most stomping majority ever? How do you win? How does Bill Clinton win? How does Donald Trump win? You win by running left economically and by being centrist culturally. That means being patriotic. It means not being obsessed over identity politics. It means not getting lost in very fine debates over, what sort of puberty blocking drugs are appropriate at one point. Again, the formula is there. Left-leaning economics, centrist, maybe even slightly right-leaning cultural approaches. Boris Johnson in the UK he won seats in places like Birmingham and Manchester, where the Conservative Party was very literally the party of Satan. And we just need to remember that formula, and that is how we will win in this country.
Just very quickly to put a bow on this, is your assessment that Vice President Harris lost the general election because of the economy and not some other reason, like, say, sexism?
So I think, again, remember the context here. If you look at elections around the world, it's really hard to point, and there were record numbers of elections around the world in industrialized countries. It's hard to point to a single country in which the incumbent leader's party won. People were really angry about inflation and by the hangover associated with COVID-19. It's not clear to me that Harris could have won under any circumstances. I think she actually ran a really good campaign considering the chalice that she was handed, with only whatever it was, 3.5 months to run a campaign. I think she was held to account for some of the more culturally left things that she said in 2019 and 2020. I think we were wrong-footed because we didn't realize that those attacks were happening in media that we don't go on. That this was coming up in podcasts with 7 million listeners as opposed to MSNBC with a 400,000 viewer footprint. And so, yeah, I'm not sure she could have won. You can't look around the world and say, oh, well, this incumbent would have survived. But again, we ran this campaign on women's reproductive rights and the defense of democracy, two absolutely critical things. But when America is really pissed off about inflation, they see you talking about those things and say, these folks don't get it.